Hello and welcome to Come to Think of It, the podcast diary program on Bizz 99.9 FM Substitute Radio. I'm Stuart Mukmuk, today's diarist. Welcome and thank you for joining me. Shooting violent video games, first-person shooters and third-person shooters, can be placed on a spectrum of how close to reality they come. There's the ultra fantasy, such as Quake, where you can be hit with a rocket launcher and still keep fighting moments later, or Halo, where you can jump 20 or 30 meters high up into the air. And then there's the ultra reality, where if you're shot once, you're finished, where there's severe micromanagement on your movements, surroundings, and tactics. An example of the ultra reality genre is the new, quote, free online game, America's Army, end quote, from The Age, which is a virtual simulation of what actually happens in the US military. America's Army was originally used to train soldiers for the US Army. The training program tries to get as close as possible to reality. It's a very good way of training up soldiers without the risk of someone dying, rather ironic, or some external interference with the operation. But now, the game has gone mainstream, where the public can play it online without charge. The basic, most obvious reason for this change in video game policy is to advertise the US Army, to make it look like an attractive career option, to show what it's like to be a soldier and allow the public to get a taste of what it's like to be in a real war. So the public are encouraged to play a gigantic advertisement for free, thankfully, on an institution that has a long history of going into sovereign countries, killing millions of innocent people, and bombing towns and cities into oblivion. Sounds fun, right? Instead of the easygoing sensation of killing fictional characters, this game makes you feel like you're actually in a jungle, that you're actually holding a gun, that you're actually killing a human being. I've never played the game, but I would imagine that to be a very disturbing sensation. Quote, Peter Mantello, a video game analyst and media studies lecturer at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan, end quote, says that a video game like America's Army can, quote, frequently perpetuate cliches about perceived Western threats and tend to protect and justify America's interests. The games frequently depict torture as acceptable and necessary to save American lives. He said gaming had always tended to exploit public fears and threats, end quote. So this video game isn't just propaganda to make the US military look attractive, to celebrate an organization that is solely designed for the purpose of murdering people, civilian and non-civilian alike, to rejoice at the sight of enemy corpses. Innocent civilians are peripheral damage, as major US officials have commonly put it. To build a player's lust for blood, thus recruiting new members into the army. It's designed to normalize the unthinkable, as one famous person once put it. The best way to stop someone from criticizing you is to put them into your shoes. So to create empathy. Then they feel what you feel, have your wants and needs and fears and goals. Putting the public into the army will cut off anti-war rhetoric and create a dual consciousness. But no, this is far worse. It's an apparatus to brainwash US conservative ideology into the minds of the innocent masses, to allow myths and stereotypes about what the US Army does when it's in operations overseas to override the truths and facts. If people were allowed to look at the cold hard facts, the dead bodies lying on the side of the road, the weeping parents, the little children who step on landmines, the babies that won't wake up, the towns decimated through bombings, throughout the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, they would be shuddered into anger and contempt. They would understand that all war is horrible beyond question. Opposition to all war would rise up and demand an end to the conflicts, a across the world. Of course, governments have an investment into war. Think about all that extra money that's being put into the Australian military budget. And so they must keep the public supporting the wars. As long as the public are shielded from the truth, a blind blissfulness will lay the foundation for pro-America, pro-war propaganda. That video game will display cliches about how US allied soldiers behave, always doing the right thing. They'd never dance around a bonfire of burning enemy corpses. They'd never laugh at mutilated civilians. They'd never cut off enemy POW heads and carry them around as souvenirs. And how the enemy behaves bloodthirsty, mentally unstable, misanthropic, evil monsters. They join the fight because they have an unstoppable desire to kill Americans, and they certainly are not interested in something as so abstract as freedom and national liberation and protecting their families and friends from murderous Americans. In my opinion, government organizations should keep their bureaucracy and agendas out of the commercial and iconographic matters. With such a strong program, which is begging for the breeding of bias and manipulation, it seems only common sense for rules to be set in place to protect the public from military propaganda, lies, misinformation, and other forms of cant. The US Army are very powerful, full of money and authority, and an unimaginable hidden control over secondary industries. With the public so delicate and vulnerable to these foreign, alien ideas, there's a huge differentiation of power and control, and so respectability should come into the equation, protecting the innocent and weak civilians against the powerful manipulation and indoctrination of the US Army propaganda. And that's all the time we have for today. This has been Come to Think of It on Bizz 99.9 FM Substitute Radio. I'm Stuart Mook. Thanks for listening to the program. Until next time, goodbye.